everyone, and welcome back. I'm Adriana Monique Alvarez with Alma Publishing, and we are continuing our conversations with the contributors of Awakening. And I'm so excited to have LaChelle with us today. Hi, and welcome.
Thank you. It's so lovely to be here.
Now, tell everyone where you're joining us from, because it's super cool.
I am currently sitting in Kathmandu, Nepal.
Very, very cool. And LaChelle, tell us a little bit about your chapter and why you wrote on the topic of, heart wisdom and conflict resolution.
So the essence of my chapter is heart-centered conflict resolution, and it's really taking it down to the foundations, looking at how we can be the change. And because in order to address any conflicts that are in our relationships or the world around us, we first have to look at our role and what's going on in our inner sphere. So in my chapter, I basically talk about the need to decrease fear levels, to increase mindful awareness, and to increase connection.
And I love this about your chapter, but I want to back up for a second because you're kind of a badass and, I don't think most people would see that coming. So you were serving as director positions of NGOs in places that are, maybe a little off the beaten path, like Sudan. Most people, it's not on their bucket list. I'm in a lot of travel groups. I don't hear about that being on the list. And I was a volunteer in my 20s, and I know things can get intense, and I was not in Sudan. I thought Myanmar and Albania were intense. So tell me how that background prepared you and set you up for what you're doing now.
That's a great question. I think I was one of those rare people who, from an early age, knew that I had an idea of what I wanted to do with my life. And I knew from the age of 12 that I wanted to work internationally. The exact capacity of that changed and shifted, developed over the years. And so I really wanted to, I mostly worked in the Middle East and East Africa and South Asia. I worked a lot in the beginning years with refugee populations, internally displaced people. That means also working in conflict zones. And with my master's in international peace and conflict resolution, it just led right into this pathway of service for me. The yoga and sound healing, the heart wisdom coaching, all of that is a bit more recent because in the capacity that I was in, serving in senior management roles for nearly a decade in a lot of these really challenging places, I burnt out a lot. I burnt out multiple times. And so it was then really learning to prioritize my own well-being and stop giving so much of myself to try and help others, at the detriment of myself, that I began to make that shift into focusing more on yoga. And then when I moved to Nepal, which was actually wearing my previous hat, when I moved here to Nepal, it opened up a whole new world with the sound healing, and everything just kind of grew from there.
I like this, and I found it to be similar for me as well, is that at some point you realize you cannot give to your own detriment. You realize too that you can't rescue or save anyone.
Yeah. And right. That's such a key component of what I call heart wisdom. Really looking at the quality of our hearts, it's that equal giving and receiving. And if we're not able to give from a cup that is filled with quality, then why are we giving in the first place?
It's so true. It's there was many times I would just pause and I would be like, I'm not in a position to give today. I'm in a position to rest and to play and to eat and to nap and all of those things. Now, I'm going to tell you something. There was something that stood out in your chapter, and we're just going to pretend this is between you, me, and that fence post, okay? So you talk a lot about connection. This is a huge theme and value for me as well. And so as you can imagine, I've had a little bit of a problem with this whole isolation and stay away from everyone, right? Especially for extended periods of time. So what would you say to someone like me, that connection, like physically being in the vicinity of people, right? Like I was missing strangers at the coffee shop. You know what I mean? What would you say to someone like me where physical closeness and connection is really, really key to our well-being? How could we navigate this season?
Yeah, that's a great question. I totally felt that as well, living in lockdown by myself. And what I realized is at one point I would go downstairs, my neighbor downstairs had a dog. And I just noticed at one point that every day I was going downstairs and spending 5 minutes petting the dog because it was the only physical connection that I had with another living being. And very unfortunately, the dog, who was advanced in age, died during lockdown. And it hit me so hard. But yeah, so I realized that even if we don't always have that physical connection, it's looking at ways that we can still nourish ourselves. And, like just giving yourself a hug. It sounds so funny to some people, but like really, like it helps a lot. And especially if you're able to just like really feel into the gratitude, and maybe even just imagine it's a loved one whose arms are around you. But the other component of that as well is that, connection pops up in these like, beautifully surprising ways sometimes. And as a yoga teacher, lockdown meant that I had to shift everything. Well, I obviously couldn't be teaching in the studios anymore. And so I made the decision to shift to online classes, which I had not been teaching as classes before, and was a bit of a challenging shift initially. But at one point, I began to realize that there was such immensely beautiful connection in it. Like a digital connection, but still connection, because I had students who were connecting into my classes from 6 different time zones. I had 13 students in one class, 6 different time zones. And when they would start coming to my classes, like they started building connection with each other. Before class would start, it's like, oh, hi, so-and-so, how are you doing today? And it's like, this is so beautiful. It's an entirely different form of connection, but definitely something to be grateful for. So I'd say those are the two main things that have helped me personally. And then obviously like calling and checking in with friends and family, although the Zoom dates get a little bit overwhelming at times.
I know, it's so true. I've used Zoom for years and I found I didn't want to use it anymore. It's like I took that down to a minimum because it was just like, it just like lost its thing. But interesting thing I found, I absolutely despise going to the dentist and hadn't went for 14 years. And in the strictest time in Mexico, I decided that I was going to go to the dentist because it was someone I could talk to and it was a human being I could interact with. So, and she was open. So I found my own creative way as well.
That's awesome.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So one of the things that in your chapter you address is fear, and how fear creates, so many things. We've got the physical response, right? It affects the way we make decisions and the way we think. And I call this like a blitz year. This is a time where we're not just getting hit with one thing, we're getting hit with multiple things. Our life is shifting. We have to make changes. And this is an extended period of time. This isn't just, oh my gosh, it was a crazy day, right? It was an intense week. We're going 5-6 months into this. So my question to you is, when we know that we're being presented with fear and anxiety and chaos and conflict, and we are finding ourselves in that fight or flight mode, we can feel our nervous system is in that spot. How do we get out of that loop, especially when the outside world is not changing, right? That's carrying on. How do I get out of this loop?
Yeah, that's a fabulous question. And like from the yoga perspective, how we start to shift out of the parasympathetic, that the fight, flight, freeze response, right? Mm-hmm. We shift out of that using our breath. We are able, just by like inhaling through our nose, exhaling out through our mouth with a bit of a sigh, That actually activates our vagus nerve, which is one of our 10 cranial nerves, connects to all of our major organs, and it connects to this parasympathetic. I mixed that up. I said parasympathetic before. The sympathetic is the fight, flight, freeze. The parasympathetic nervous system is the part of our nervous system that, when we allow ourselves to take that long, slow, deep exhale, is connecting in with that and is telling our body, I'm safe, I'm okay, I can relax. So this is why breath is very often used for meditation as well, like following the flow of the breath. I think the other really key points of your question is really asking, I mean, for everything that happens in our lives, especially if I look at conflict of any kind, and this year has had plenty of conflict already. So if we look at that, it's like, okay, what is this reflecting back to me? Where are the areas in my life that I might need to shift, or what is it drawing my attention to? What can I learn? And when we look at it that way, what I've realized for myself and for my clients over the last month or so is that 2020 is absolutely asking us, how present can you be? Can you live in this present moment? Not worrying about everything that you can't control. And that's where the fear comes into play, right? Because we've got that attachment to something that we're trying to control that we have no control over. So it's how much can you actually stay in this present moment? With gratitude is a really key part of that too.
I love that. You know, it takes me back to a time when we first started our business and it was high stress. There was an economic collapse. The real estate market had just crashed. We were starting a business. We were newly married. We had a lot of bills and not a lot of income. And I remember hearing that one day. Everything is perfect in this moment. Everything that gets you wound up and afraid and all that is somewhere out in the future.
Yeah.
Because when I pause, like in this moment, I had everything I needed. In this moment, I was safe. In this moment, there was something to be enjoyed. So I love that. It really is. It's like, okay, moment by moment, can I be in the moment?
Yeah.
Can I be here?
And that's absolutely a practice. I mean, just like yoga, like meditation, like life, it is a practice. And it's noticing like how, if you can notice just a few seconds sooner that you have got caught up in this story, this narrative of fear, and you come back to your breath, like that's the practice. Being in this present moment doesn't come easy for any of us in human form. It is a practice.
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah, that breath. Like you said, if you can spot it the second it starts rolling, right? Not when you're like 3 hours into it. Now, you obviously speak a lot about the heart. Okay, so especially right now, how can we get out of the mind, right? That can just be firing and going a mile a minute. How do we come back to our hearts?
There are a variety of different ways that we can do that. I mean, one is using the breath, like breathing in and out of the heart space. It's also one of the ways when I started my yogic journey, one of my teachers challenged me to do a gratitude practice every day, to write down 3 things that I was grateful for. And it was super easy for the first week or two. I had no problem. And then suddenly it became really challenging. I was writing down things like the color of my eyes. And my teacher very lovingly challenged me, like, yeah, that's not really so meaningful now, is it? And so what she asked me to do was to ask my friends and family what they saw in me, the traits and characteristics that I had that they really appreciated about me. And that was actually the biggest learning from that whole journey, that whole gratitude practice, was actually like, can I actually reach out to someone else and genuinely receive the goodness that they're reflecting back to me? So I think that's another really key part of coming into the heart. It's that equal giving and receiving, like we talked about before, not giving so much of yourself. And then with all of these practices, like even the last question that you asked, like the practice of just being present also really requires us to be compassionate towards ourselves and towards each other. And like, if we're not familiar with the idea of self-compassion and how that actually feels in our body, it's as simple as saying, it's okay, I'll give it another try.
Yes. I love that. I love that. It's true, because one of the things that I've noticed is if I'm going to enjoy this moment, if I'm going to be present today, if I'm going to actively, consciously choose to contribute joy to this day and love to this day, then the way I think about myself, what I tell myself, right, changes. It has to line up with that, because you can't be directing all this here and then, oh, awesome, loving compassion out here, right? It doesn't work that way.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I love that. It's true.
That vibration, that emotional state that we choose to be in, and it is a choice. It's not always an easy one, but it is a choice. But it definitely influences those around us. Just to quickly share, like I love doing sound energy workshops, and in those I use water as the medium to illustrate the power of our thoughts and intentions, because water is so malleable. And I mean, there's different research studies that have depicted this as well. But the water picks up the emotional state that we are projecting out into it. And you can even, I do this in my experiments, you can taste the difference afterwards. So, you know, if you consider that the average adult human is 65% water, you bet your emotions are going to impact not only you, but everyone around you as well.
Oh, yes. I've seen that. Like, if I'm this way, right, my kids, my husband, like everybody can feel it. It's just like when you walk into a room and you go, oh, like maybe I should walk back out because it's like tense in here. It's yeah. And that is actually something that I keep reminding myself of, is that is how much power we hold, right? I have the choice of the emotion, I have the choice of the thought, I have the choice of how I'm going to be today. And that not only affects my physical body, right? It affects every part, all of my bodies, but it affects and infects everyone in my home, right? And then if it does that, wherever we go, whoever else we're in contact with, and that's actually been what I had to shift personally. And what I loved about your chapter, it's like, this isn't about what's going on out there. It isn't about the other person. It's not about that political party. It's not about that thing. It's not about the news. It's about what is going on in here.
Yep. Yeah.
This
absolutely.
is where I hold the power. Yeah. So I would love if you would share with us how people can connect with you, learn more about your work.
Yeah, sure. I'm pretty active on my Facebook and Instagram pages. That's Silence of Sound Yoga. And my website's the same, silenceofsoundyoga.com. Those are the main the digital platforms. I'm also just next week starting an online experiential course which combines yoga and sound healing, meditation, and the heart wisdom. And it is many of the things that we just talked about. It's basically like a feel it to heal it experiential course. So it's looking specifically, it's called Unstruck Sound, which is the English translation of Anahata, which is the Sanskrit for the heart chakra, the heart energy center. And so it's called Unstruck Sound, feeling seen, heard, and valued.
Oh my goodness. Be sure to send me information on that. That sounds amazing. That sounds perfect for me.
I will definitely do that.
I'm so glad that I got to meet you and learn about you through this book. I really appreciate what you contributed and who you are and what you do in this world. I mean, what a beautiful time to have someone like you reminding us and connecting us back to our hearts and to who we really are. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I'm so grateful for the opportunity, and I've loved learning more about you and all of the inspiration and the wisdom that you share on your platforms as well. Thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I want to remind everyone to pick up their copy of Awakening. If you haven't got it already, you can get it on Amazon. Go straight to LaChelle's chapter. You're going to literally feel your body change just reading her words. It's amazing. And I want to remind you, if you'd like to be in our next book visionary, I will put the link to the application in the comments. Thank you so much for joining me all the way from Nepal. Thank you everyone who tuned in with us. Big hugs from Colorado. Until next time, talk soon. Bye.